seated, thank you.
Morning, Your Honor.
Are there any matters we need to address today before we get started?
None from the defense, Your Honor.
Okay.
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, then are we ready to proceed with our witnesses?
We are, Your Honor. The defense would call Joanna Turner. She is out.
Ma'am? Raise your hand. Right hand.
Do you solemnly swear upon that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Please go ahead and let yourself rewind. Have a seat and bring it to your feet. You can use the microphone, but don't get too close.
Good morning, Ms. Turner.
Good morning.
Ms. Turner, would you please state your full name for the record?
Joanna Turner,
And where do you reside? Not your physical address, but your county and state, please.
Pasco County,
Okay, and how long have you resided here in Pasco County?
about 7, 8 years.
Okay. Are you employed or are you retired?
I'm retired.
Okay. And do you have an idea of when it was that you retired?
About 2005.
2005? And what was your occupation prior to your retirement, Ms. Turner?
I was in banking
Okay.
and some traveling industry.
What did you do in banking?
I started off as a head teller,
Okay.
and then I managed bank. I was the bank manager.
You were the bank manager at some point in time. And then you also worked, you said, for the airlines?
Yes.
And what airlines did you work for?
I worked for United, and I also worked for Continental.
Would you please tell the court what positions you held there at the airline?
I was a reservation rep.
A rep? Okay. How long did you work for the airline?
A couple years.
I'm going to direct your attention, Ms. Turner, to January the 13th of 2014, and I'm going to ask you to please reflect back on that particular day, specifically that mid-afternoon. What were you and your husband doing on January the 13th of 2014?
We went to a movie in Cobb's Theater.
And could you please tell the court what movie you went to go see at the Cobb Theater?
Lone Survivor.
Okay. Can you tell the court about what time you arrived there at the movie theater?
I would say 1:15.
Okay. When you arrived at the theater, did you go and buy some condiments, some popcorn and what have you?
Yes, we have popcorn and a large drink.
And did you then proceed to the theater itself?
Yes.
And was that theater 10?
Yes.
When you walked into the theater, were the previews already playing?
Yes.
Okay. And so what was the lighting conditions? Please describe to the court what the lighting conditions were as you were walking into the theater.
Dim.
The lighting source that you were getting in that theater, was that from the lights down below?
A little bit.
Okay. And so were you able to walk
Yes.
to your particular seat?
Yes.
Would you please tell the court what seat you selected, you and your husband selected, that day?
We were sitting in the back row toward to the aisle.
Did you select that seat for a particular reason?
Yes.
Okay, and what was the reason that you selected that seat?
My husband's disabled, so sometimes we need to go to the restroom, so we always sit on the aisle seat.
So by sitting on the aisle seats, it's more convenient for him just to step out and walk out?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Rupach, can we have, let's have, just for purposes of the record, this is JPEG number 2060786. Ms. Turner, I'd like you to take a look at this particular exhibit. And for purposes of the record, the thumb drive exhibit is going to be defense exhibit number 9. I want you to take a look at that exhibit and see if you recognize the theater setting in that exhibit. I'm going to show you a few more as well.
Yes.
Okay. Let me also show you (2081418). Do you recognize that exhibit as well?
Yes.
Okay. And were both of those exhibits the comp theater, specifically Theater 10, that you attended or that you sat in on January the 13th of 2014?
Yes.
Go now to JPEG 2060543. Do you recognize that particular exhibit?
Yes.
And is that the row of the comp theater that you sat in on January the 13th of 2014?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I ask the witness to step down? Ms. Turner, if you can step down and please come over to this particular monitor here. I would like for you to point to the seat, first of all, that your husband was seated in. And then I'd like you to point to the seat that you were seated in. So for purposes of the record, you first pointed to the seat that is immediately adjacent to the aisle of the last row. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you were one seat in from your husband. Is that correct?
Correct.
You may take your seat. Okay, so you went into the theater, you sat down in that fashion. Did you start watching the previews?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the sound like in that theater while you were watching the previews?
It was loud.
And were you focused on watching the previews? Were you paying attention to the previews?
Yes.
When you walked into that theater, was anybody standing in the theater?
No.
Everybody was seated?
Yes.
And so as a result, you sat down as well.
Yes.
Now, you're there at the movie theater and you're watching the previews. The previews you said are loud. Please tell the court what happens next.
Then I suddenly see a man standing up. So I was looking at him. And he stand up, sort of turn his left toward to the back row.
Okay, so let's stop right there. We're going to analyze that a little bit. So this man that stood up, was he a small man or was he a tall man?
He was a tall man.
Okay. And you said that when he stood up, he turned and faced the back row?
Mm-hmm.
And that back row, would that be this row right here?
No,
Facing the back row.
the row in front of me, the row behind, in front of me.
Okay. He was standing in this row right here, and he was facing this row right here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then if I may have a second. Okay, so you're saying this gentleman now stood up, this tall gentleman, and he is faced now towards the back of the row. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is this back here? What is that?
It's a wall.
It's a wall, and it's directly behind the seats. Is it directly behind the seats in that last row, that
Yeah,
wall?
Yes.
Okay. So what is this gentleman doing now that he's turned around and he is facing that back row?
I see him was talking, and then he was holding some kind of mug or thermos.
And what color was that mug or thermos?
It's a dark color.
Okay. So you didn't know whether it was a cup, you didn't know whether it was a thermos, but you remember it being dark.
Yes.
And would you show the court, if you can, show the court what this gentleman was doing with that dark object?
He was doing a real quick motion of throwing.
Okay. What I'd like you to do, may I ask the witness to stand up?
She may.
If you can please stand up. And I'd like you to step right over here if you can. And I'd like you to show the court what you have just described as that quick throwing motion.
Right.
Where were you focused now after that throwing motion?
I started watching the preview again.
Okay. So now you're back to watching the preview. And are you attentive to the preview at this point in time? Paying attention to the preview?
Yes.
Okay. How much time lapses now between that throwing motion and then you sitting and watching the preview again and the next activity?
I would say 4 to 6 seconds.
Okay. And so what causes you to change your attention from the previews to something else?
I hear a loud voice
Okay.
saying
And do you know where that loud voice is coming from?
to my left, yes.
Okay. And where to your left?
To my left.
Okay. Could you tell who was speaking in a loud voice?
I didn't until I look at him.
Okay.
It's the
And
same gentleman.
what same gentleman?
The gentleman that stand up.
The gentleman that stand up. And so you're talking about the gentleman that stood up in this particular row here, the second row, down from the wall.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct.
And is that where that same gentleman did the throwing motion that you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So the sequence of events then is you see the throwing motion with the dark object. You're looking at the previews again for 4 or 5 seconds. And then you hear the loud voice again. You turn around, and the gentleman was still standing where he was standing when you saw him doing the throwing motion. What did you do now?
I was watching the gentleman, and all of a sudden my eye was moved to Mr. Reeves.
Before we go to Mr. Reeves, and you said your eye was moved over to Mr. Reeves, what did you hear this tall gentleman with a loud voice saying?
I'm texting my daughter.
Okay? You hear him saying anything else?
I think I heard, if you don't mind.
Okay? Anything else?
No.
So now what do you do?
Now I see Mr. Reeves. The way he was sitting was very funny.
Okay, so let's try to describe that. Let's picture yourself being Mr. Reeves. Picture yourself that being the seat that Mr. Reeves was seated in. Would you please show the court what you remember as you looked over to Mr. Reeves, how he was sitting at that point in time funny?
Leaning to his left.
Okay. And that would have been, that observation by you would have been after you saw this tall gentleman with a dark object in his hand with a throwing knife.
Objection, ask and answer.
I'll overrule.
That was after the throwing of the dark object in the hand with a throwing motion, and that was after the loud voice that you heard, "I'm texting my daughter," that you looked over.
That was before
What was before?
the throwing action.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Let's try to take the sequence of events again.
Okay.
Dark object in the hand, throwing motion.
Mhm.
Correct? Then you start looking at the previews 4 to 5 seconds, correct?
Yes.
Then you hear the tall gentleman with a loud voice, correct?
Yes,
Saying, "I'm texting my daughter."
yes,
Then you look over to your row, where Mr. Reeves was at, and you're looking at Mr. Reeves. Is that correct?
yes,
And you see Mr. Reeves seated now kind of sideways.
Judge, I'm going to object to the characterization that Mr. Escobar is showing. That's not the testimony that Mrs. Turner gave.
Please.
He's leaning to the right, she's saying leaning to the left.
It's to the left. If I'm sitting here, I'm the other way. Go ahead. I want you to show the court. Leaning to Mr. Reeves' left.
left,
Left. Okay. So, are you watching him?
yes.
Okay. Up until this point in time, had you heard Mr. Reeves say anything?
No,
So what's happening now?
after that, I see popcorn flying over, and I see popcorn landing on Mr. Reeves' stomach. And very quickly, I see the ring of fire.
How much time lapsed before you first looked at Mr. Reeves and you saw him leaning to his left, and the time that you first saw the popcorn? How much time?
2 seconds?
And so what happens after you see the popcorn?
After I saw the popcorn landing on his stomach, that's when the fire started.
You mean the fire from the weapon?
I didn't see the weapon, but I see the ring of fire.
Okay. So now what do you do?
Now I look at Mr. Reeves. He put his gun down on his lap,
Okay.
and he was holding his head with 2 hands.
Please show the court what you saw Mr. Reeves doing after he placed the firearm on his lap. You see Mr. Reeves do anything else at that point?
No.
So what was your focus now?
Then I would look at Mr. Olson. He was still standing. Then he took 2 steps to his left, like he's gonna exit. Then he collapsed.
What did you do at this point, Ms. Turner?
I was still in my seat.
At some point in time, did you get up?
Yes, after I see his gun is being possessed.
Meaning after you see someone retrieving the gun that Mr. Reeves possessed?
Right.
Explain to the court what you saw in that process.
After Mr. Olson collapsed, I see a gentleman come up to Mr. Reeves, and I saw a gesture of like a badge and give me the gun suggestion.
And did the gentleman reach to Mr. Reeves' lap and retrieve the gun?
I didn't really see that clear.
Okay. Now what did you do?
Then I stand up, start standing on this aisle.
Well, let's stop there for a second. Up until that point in time, are you and your husband still seated?
Up until what time?
Up until the time that you see the deputy bringing, well, even give you even further. Up until the time that you see the ring of fire, were you and your husband still seated in the same place that you earlier testified?
Yes, we are.
You're not standing up.
No,
Your husband's not standing up.
no.
So now what do you do? You're going to get up? You're up? What do you do?
I start walking down the stairs.
Okay. And what were you going to go do?
Just kind of away from the thing.
Okay. And so how far down the stairs did you get in that theater?
I was on the bottom of the stairs.
Okay. And let me take us to 2081418 JPEG, still in exhibit number 9. Okay. So, may I ask the witness to step down? Ms. Turner, please. Please show the court on this particular photo where it is that you left your seat and where you went.
Kind of in this area.
So you were somewhere in this particular area?
Right, there's a platform here.
There's a platform. This yellow bar is a dividing area in the general section. You're saying there's a platform there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's where you stood?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, please. So now what did you do there?
Well, I was waiting for my husband, and then I see this woman coming down the stairs,
Okay,
and then I saw her hand was bloody.
okay.
So I was asking her if she hurt, and she told me she thinks she got her finger shot off.
Okay. And what did you do for that young lady?
Well, at that time I only have popcorn napkin on my hand, so I just offered that to her.
Okay. And did she take that?
Yes, she did.
Where did you go from there?
After that, the theater attendants was asking people to go to the exit, opening the door so the ambulance and the policeman can notify which theater it is. So me and another gentleman, we opened the exit door, and I was waiting out there.
Okay. You were assisting in an effort for ambulance to get through the back door,
The exit door, yeah.
the exit door?
Mhm.
And how long were you there in that particular area?
Oh, a good half an hour.
Okay. And did you see Mr. Reeves while you were there in that exit door?
Yes.
Okay. And please tell the court where and how you saw Mr. Reeves while you were there at that exit door.
I saw Mr. Reeves was handcuffed, and then there's policemen around him, escort him to the police car.
Did you see Mr. Reeves offer any resistance whatsoever?
No.
And what did they do with Mr. Reeves once they took him out that back door?
Objection, relevance, Judge.
Yeah. I'll allow it to the extent that she knows.
What did they do with Mr. Reeves when they took him out the door?
They put him in the back of the police car.
Okay. Did he offer any resistance there?
No.
Now, you were there at that back door for how long?
I would guess 30 minutes.
Okay. And would you tell me where you went from that point?
I went inside.
And why did you go inside?
I was looking for my husband.
Did you find him?
I saw him, yeah.
Where was he?
He was down on the other end,
Down on the other end?
opposite end.
May I ask her to step down?
Sure.
Ms. Turner? Hate to keep asking you to step down, but it's probably better than you just standing up here, right? Please show the court where your husband was and where you went
He
to the
was
theater.
somewhere in this area.
Somewhere in this area
This
here?
platform here.
This platform here? Okay. And was he alone or was he with other people?
There's a lot of people around.
Okay,
Yeah.
please. Those people that we're talking about that were around, were those patrons that had been there at the theater
And also law enforcement.
and also law enforcement? Now, you're saying a group of people were there with now you and your husband, is that correct?
This is still at the theater?
Right there in the congregation that we just talked about.
Yeah, there's a group of people.
You and your husband are there as well.
Yes,
And are people talking?
yes.
Did the police officer that was there in that group tell you, Mrs. Turner, and everyone, you cannot talk amongst each other?
No.
Did your husband talk to those people?
He talked to somebody, I don't know who it is.
Now, while you were there, were you given any type of form to fill out?
Yes.
And were other people in that group also given forms to fill out? And when you were given that form, did any police officer tell you you're not to discuss this case with anybody else?
No.
Did you hear an officer telling anyone in that group, don't discuss what you saw with anybody else?
No.
You filled out your form.
Yes.
Your husband filled out his form.
Yes.
And did you discuss with your husband this dark object that you remember that tall gentleman doing the throwing motion?
Yes, I did.
As you told the court today. You told him what you told the court today.
Yeah, after.
After your congregation and the signing of the statement.
Right.
And did you put that throwing motion also in the statement that you wrote there when you were in that congregation?
Yes.
And that was a form that was given to you by law enforcement to fill out, correct?
Correct.
And you gave that form back to law enforcement, did you not?
Yes.
So that they could use it for their investigation, correct?
Objection to leading judge.
16.
Now, after your period of time there, in that area of the theater, were you also interviewed?
Yes, I was.
And would you please tell the court, when you left, did you leave that group after a while? How long were you with that group down here at this platform?
Maybe 10 minutes.
Okay. And after those 10 minutes, where did you go?
They asked us to go to across the theater across.
Okay, they asked you to go outside Theater 10?
Yes.
Okay. And is there a concession area, tables and what have you, outside of Theater 10?
No, they put us in another theater.
They put you in another theater. So you went from this theater to another theater?
Yes.
Never made it to a concession area?
No.
Okay. Now, when you went to that other theater, how many people were in that theater?
I would guess around 20 or less.
And people talking?
A little bit.
And when you went into that theater, or before you went in that theater, did any police officer say, Mrs. Turner, you're not to discuss your testimony or anything that you saw in the theater now in this new theater?
No.
While you were in the new theater, at any point in time, did any law enforcement tell you or ask you not to discuss what you saw with anybody in that room?
Objection, ask the answer, Judge.
New theater, a little different.
He just asked, before you went in there, did anybody tell you? Then he asked the same question again.
Wow, you were. Honolulu.
Thank you. While you were in that theater, did you overhear any police officer tell you, or anybody else in there, ladies and gentlemen, Do not discuss what you saw in that Theater 10 amongst yourself here.
No.
And you were in that second theater for how long?
Maybe 20 minutes or more.
Is this where your interview with the detective took place?
We're waiting for the detective.
Okay. Where did your interview with the detective take place?
In the room, I guess I call it a mob room because they have mops there and I have a table.
Okay. They took you to the mop room. Okay. Just you and the
I
detective?
guess cleaning room,
Okay. Just you and the detective?
just me and him, yeah.
And how long or how short was your interview in that room?
I would say about 10 minutes maybe.
Do you know if that detective had the form you had filled out?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you know if that detective had the form that you
Yeah.
had filled out?
He has,
He had it right there in front of him.
right.
And did that detective ask you about that object, that dark object, and the throwing motion?
He didn't ask me, but I told him.
Could that interview with that detective, could that have been as short as 5 minutes?
I think it's longer than 5 minutes.
Where did you go next?
After the interview, we went home.
You went home with your husband.
Yes.
No further question. I tender the witness.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Turner.
Good morning.
Now, you didn't notice Mr. Olson until you saw him stand up, isn't that correct?
Correct.
In fact, when you first saw Mr. Olson stand up, you thought that he was friends with someone in the back row, didn't you?
Yes.
You saw Mr. Reeves before you saw Mr. Olson stand up, right?
Yes.
Did you see him get up out of his seat to go to somewhere down the stairs?
You mean Mr. Reed?
Mr. Reeves, I'm sorry, yes.
No, I wasn't there then.
Okay. Did you see when he returned to his seat?
Yes.
How would you describe his demeanor at the time he returned to his seat?
I thought he was kind of rude because he didn't say excuse me. So he just kind of walked in front of me trying to get by.
And when you saw him trying to get by, can you describe to the court how he was doing that?
Carefully.
Didn't step on you?
No, I put my feet back.
Okay. He didn't have any trouble getting past you, did he?
A little bit.
Because of the width of the row?
Correct.
Now let's talk a little bit about the lighting. Isn't it true that although it was dim, you could see the people next to you, right?
Yes.
You could see 5 seats away, couldn't you?
Yes.
And you could see 10 seats away, right?
Pretty much.
There was sufficient lighting that you could tell what activities people were doing at the time, right?
Yes.
You didn't have any problems getting up the stairs or down the stairs.
No.
There was lights among the walkway, right?
Correct.
And then there were lights on the side of the theater as well, wasn't there?
I don't know the sides.
Okay.
I know there's...
Overhead lights though, right?
Yeah.
There's sufficient lighting to see what people around you were doing, correct? Now, with regard to the previews playing, do you have any recollection as to what previews were playing when you arrived at the theater?
No.
Do you have any recollection as to any of the previews you may have seen?
No.
And what about the sound of the previews?
It's loud.
It was loud, but you could still hear people talking over the previews, couldn't you?
Yes.
And in fact, you could hear people talking 5 or 10 seats away, right?
If I pay attention, I probably could.
And you didn't have any trouble hearing Mr. Olson saying he was texting his daughter, if you don't mind, right?
Right.
Now, when you saw Mr. Olson stand, we've already indicated that you thought that they were friends. At what point did you realize they did not know each other?
When I hear I'm texting my daughter.
And you had indicated that you had heard, "I'm texting my daughter," and then you saw Mr. Olson with something that you can't tell the court.
Judge, I'm going to object. That is not her testimony at all. The throwing motion was before the texting of the daughter. She's trying to put a mischaracterization of her direct testimony in right now.
I'll rephrase. When you saw Mr. Olson with something in his hands, you can't tell us what it was, correct?
Right.
You think it was something dark,
Correct.
and you thought it was a thermos.
I thought it was a thermos.
And isn't that a fact because you didn't recognize it to be a cup that you had bought at the concession stand, correct?
Correct.
But isn't it also a fact that what you indicated all along was that it was a mock throwing motion, right?
Quick throw.
Quick. You never saw anything leave Mr. Olson's hand, isn't that correct?
Right.
And in fact, when that mock throwing motion occurred, you didn't see any reaction from Mr. Reeves, did you?
No.
You didn't see Mr. Reeves back up, correct?
Correct.
Didn't see Mr. Reeves put his hand to his face?
No.
And in fact, you didn't see Mr. Reeves try to dodge it at any point, correct? And you indicated this was very quick. As if just to go like that, correct?
Right.
Now, isn't it true that most of the time your attention was toward Mr. Reeves in this odd left tilt motion that he was doing?
Yes.
You indicated that you saw the popcorn, right? And then you saw the popcorn land, correct?
Correct.
You're really not able to tell us how long between these events, isn't that true?
How long between what event?
Between the events of seeing Mr. Reeves come back from wherever he was, be rude as he walked past you, then you saw him sit down. So you can't give us a time frame of events from seeing him come in, sit down, hearing Mr. Olson say, "I'm texting my daughter if you don't mind," seeing Mr. Olson make the mock throw, seeing the popcorn fly, and then hearing what you characterize as a ring of fire. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I can put a time on it.
Okay. Can't say if it was 1 second,
Just everything happened so quickly.
3 seconds, or 5 seconds, right? It was a point in time, a little snapshot or snippet, right? Because you were looking at, you indicated that you were looking back at the previews, you're looking over here, seeing him stand, you're then looking at Mr. Reeves. You can't give us a clear-cut time frame on any of that, correct?
Right.
Did you notice whether or not Mr. Reeves was wearing glasses when he returned and rudely walked past you?
No.
And you never saw Chad Olson throw any type of punch at Mr. Reeves, did you?
No.
Never saw Mr. Reeves react as if he'd been hit by any type of punch.
No.
Now, when you came down the stairs and had your interaction with Mrs. Olson, How long after was it that the law enforcement officers arrived?
I would say a good 15, 20 minutes.
And can you describe the law enforcement officer that you first saw?
Well, I walk to the corner of the back of the theater.
Where the door was?
No, we're kind of in the middle, so I walk to the corner of the theater building, trying to see if I can see
Oh, outside.
outside.
Okay.
Because I was at the outside.
Okay.
Because I hear sirens, then I see the police car just go to the front. Nobody, so I was back there waving.
Waving?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
trying to get their attention. So the first time I saw it, then all of a sudden there's one police car coming, and I was telling her, it's a female law enforcement. I was telling her, that door is open. That's where it happens.
So when you finally get back in the theater and you're trying to find Mr. Turner, and you go to that aisle as if you would exit the theater, right? You're on, if we looked at that piece of photograph, it would be to the left of that, where the exit door would be? That's where you met up with him?
That's where I was standing.
And when these law enforcement officers came in, it's your testimony that they didn't tell you not to discuss it among yourselves?
No.
Okay. Were you standing right there when they were talking to this whole group of, how many people did you say was standing there?
Well, quite a bit. I think 20 or so. A lot of law enforcement people in there as well.
So did you talk to every law enforcement officer that was in there?
Oh, no.
Now, you indicated that people were talking. You don't know what they were talking about, though, do you? They weren't talking about this case and what had happened, were they?
I don't know.
Can you tell any part of any conversation that you may have overheard that day?
No.
If you had heard anything about this case, did that affect your ability to make your written statement?
No.
In fact, you didn't see the same things that your husband, Mr. Turner, saw.
Correct.
Okay. And you wrote your own statement based upon what you saw and what you heard, correct? And when you were interviewed by yourself, correct?
Correct.
With a male detective?
Yes.
And you told him what you actually saw, not what you may have heard from anybody else, correct? Did you ever go out in the concession area and sit at a table?
No.
Did you ever see Curtis Reeves' wife, Vivian Reeves, after the shooting?
No.
One minute here. Just a couple more questions, Mrs. Turner. After you indicated that you saw an off-duty officer come over and show the badge, you're not sure what happened at that point, but did you at any point look over, you were watching Mr. Reeves, correct? At that time?
After the shooting?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you notice that he had any injuries on his face?
No.
Okay, you indicated that he was sitting with his hands in his face and had his head down. You didn't see any blood on him, did you?
No.
You didn't see any indication that he'd been struck with anything, did you?
No.
And in fact, can you recall at that point if you saw him wearing glasses?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so you wouldn't have seen his glasses turn like this or anything like that, him messing with his glasses?
No, I didn't see that.
Nothing further to this witness, Your Honor.
Good morning again, Ms. Turner.
Good morning.
Ms. Turner, I want to take you back to the sequence of events because obviously they're so important in this case, okay? Now, you indicated on direct and on cross-examination that as you were seated there, initially, watching the previews, the first thing that caught your attention was a man standing up.
Judge, objection, ask and answer, and leave.
Judge, the sequence of events is very important, and they attack that sequence.
All right.
And he
it
can't,
has
he
been-
can't put the words in her mouth, Judge. We're
I
objecting.
was getting to that.
Thank you.
I will, Your
It
Honor.
has been asked and answered, but rephrased for the
Okay.
leading. I'm going to allow you to go over it a little bit more, but
Okay.
no leading. Sustained testimony.
What's the first thing, you're there seated, watching the previews, the first thing that catches your attention other than the previews?
A man standing up,
Okay. Man standing up. What's he doing?
just turning around.
Okay. Is he talking?
I think he is.
What's he saying?
I don't know.
Why couldn't you hear what he was saying?
Objection, speculation.
To the extent she knows, I'll allow it overall.
Why couldn't you hear what he was saying?
I wasn't paying attention.
Were the previews loud?
Yes.
What do you see him doing next?
Throwing the cup motion.
Cut motion. Now, at this point in time, are you just looking at him?
Yes.
You're not looking at Mr. Reeves. After that cut motion, where do your eyes go?
Back to the preview.
You're focused on the previews only?
Objection, leading.
You're focused on the previews?
Mm-hmm.
You're not looking at Mr. Reeves now?
No.
What next detracts your attention from the previews?
I heard I'm taxiing my daughter.
Now, what are you looking at?
I'm looking at to my left
And to your left where?
at Mr. Olson.
206-0543. Your Honor, this is going to be 206-0543 of Defense Exhibit number 9. May I ask her to step down?
You may.
Now, when you hear that from Mr. Olson, where's Mr. Olson standing?
Somewhere here.
You can point, if you could turn a little bit to your left so the judge can see.
I'm going to object, ask and answer. And this was not anything that I had inquired on in cross-examination.
I'm going to tie it up very quickly, Your Honor.
Doing it.
I'm going to tie it up very quickly. Please point where Mr. Olson was standing.
Probably somewhere here.
Okay. Now, is your attention focused on him exclusively at that point?
Yes.
You're not looking at Mr. Reeves.
No.
What takes your attention now from Mr. Olson somewhere else?
The way Mr. Reeves is sitting.
Okay. So now, do you look at Mr. Reeves? And this is where you said he was seated with sideways to his left? Are you looking at Mr. Olson anymore?
No.
Now you're focused strictly on Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
How long are you watching Mr. Reeves now?
Objection, Judge, this is all just rehashing what he's already done on the rec.
Judge, it is not, because the segment, I can tell you, the segments of her focus were very focused on one particular area. And so she does it as a piecemeal. And so what the prosecution tried to do was to mix her viewing Mr. Olson and Mr. Reeves together. And it didn't happen that way. There were sequences of events that caused her to focus on one person, then there was another sequence of events that caused her to focus on the other person, and to the exclusion of each other.
And Judge, she testified to this previously. He's just rehashing his entire direct.
If you remember her cross, that's exactly what she was trying to portray, was that she was focused both on Mr. Olson and Mr. Reeves simultaneously, and that is not her testimony. So now you're looking at Mr. Reeves, is that correct? Because he's sitting sideways, correct?
Correct.
Are you looking at Mr. Olson?
No.
How long are you looking at Mr. Reeves as he's sitting sideways like that?
3-4 seconds?
And you're not looking at Mr. Olson anymore, right?
Right.
Objection, ask and answer, Judge.
When's the next time that you first, after those 3 or 4 seconds, when's the next time that you glance over to Mr. Olson?
After the shot fired.
No further questions. Oh, Your Honor, we would introduce Defense Exhibit number 9, which has been stipulated to.
All right, it'll be number 7 when it's admitted. May this witness be released?
Subject to recall, but yes, today.
Subject to recall today?
No, subject to recall, but she can be released today. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right.
We ask you to remain under subpoena, but we'll contact her.
Okay. Ms. Turner, you're free to go today, but you may receive a phone call indicating that you're needed back again, okay? So please, if you get that call, either return the call or take it, and hopefully you're good to go, at least for today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Your Honor, since we're going to have some computers and what have you that we need to hook up, if we can have a 10-minute, 15-minute break, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
The next one will be a very, very long witness, probably well into the early part or mid part of the afternoon.
All right. And who's the next witness?
My next defense would call Bruce Koenig.
All right. And you need about 10 to 15 minutes to prepare?
Yes, Your Honor, just to set up our equipment.
All right. Take a 15-minute recess.
All right.
Yeah, group bond. Would you give her
I got just George's life.